The moment you realize you're being watched is, well, it's terrifying. But what happens when that fear isn't just a shiver down your spine? When it becomes a weapon?
When an adversary, uses uncertainty itself, not violence, to just dismantle your world piece by piece before they even lay a hand on you.
Exactly. And that's really where we're going to start today.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are pulling back the curtain on a truly, truly chilling narrative. We're treating it as a real-world case study in forensic analysis and psychological terror.
We're calling it the Midnight Caller investigation in Florida.
And the source material we have to work with is just incredible.
It really is. This isn't just someone's retelling of a story. We have the operational files, police reports, internal meeting notes, and you can just feel the chaos and frustration inside the Volusia County Sheriff's Office.
We also have detailed FBI psychological profiles and these harrowing, just gut-wrenching personal accounts from the primary target, a woman named Erin O'Malley.
So our mission today is pretty rigorous. We're going to unpack the investigation's forensic timeline, look really critically at the clues the clues they initially missed.
Yeah, and we're going to pinpoint the highly specific, deeply psychological victim profile and explore the profound impact of trauma. And not just on the perpetrator, but, on the woman who survived it all.
We're taking this whole narrative apart to understand not just what happened, but how the investigation was finally cracked.
So let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this investigation by starting where the terror really began. And that's the stalking campaign. We're not starting with the body, we're starting with fear itself. This campaign of psychological warfare launched against Erin O'Malley, who was an ER nurse at Florida Memorial.
And this wasn't just some casual observer. You can see right away it has the signature, the intentional pre-attack stress.
What does that mean exactly? Pre-attack stress.
It's the hallmark of a predator who needs to establish control before the final move. The evidence they uncovered later, this hidden trove of photographs, showed the astonishing depth of the surveillance. Detective Tony Marino, he was the lead on the case.
Right.
He found photos of Erin taken at the most mundane, intimate locations, the places you think are completely 100% safe.
Exactly. We're talking about snapshots of her loading groceries into her car,
leaving the hospital after a long shift,
relaxing on her own front porch, and critically, playing with her son, Jack, in their fenced-in backyard. I mean, it's
a total violation. There was even a picture taken of her at a local Easter picnic fundraiser, a public event where she would have assumed complete anonymity.
So this tells you two things about the perpetrator right away.
Oh, at least two. First, he was patient, and he was highly, highly skilled at just blending in, fading into the background.
And second, he was spending an immense amount of time dedicated, entirely to her routine.
But the most horrifying detail, the one that really makes your skin crawl, is his specific ritual with these pictures.
That signature. Every single photograph had a thick, black X drawn directly over Erin's face.
It's just chilling. It serves multiple psychological purposes. I mean, first, it's a clear process of dehumanization. She's marked. She is mentally and on the photo physically marked for elimination.
It's like she's already gone in his mind.
Precisely. But it's also a form of psychological confession. He's telling her, or maybe he's just telling himself, that she is already selected, already condemned. It's a visual countdown. And for Erin, once she realized the extent of it, it must have been utterly paralyzing.
But the terror, it wasn't just visual, it was auditory too.
Right. She was plagued by these continuous silent phone calls. The reports describe them as classic, heavy-breathing hang-ups.
And always originating from a blocked number, the unknown name, unknown number thing.
Exactly. And this is a really critical point for the timeline analysis. These calls started well before the first disappearance, before Ann Morton was even publicly linked to a pattern of any kind.
So Erin tried to fight back, right? She took defensive measures.
Oh, she did. She screened her calls. She even went so far as to change her number to an unlisted private line. She did everything you're supposed to do.
But the calls returned.
They did. And that right there, that underscores the perpetrator's relentlessness, his operational capability.
How does someone do that?
Well, whether he was using stolen police scanners, hacking phone records, or, simply paying someone for access, he demonstrated an ability to locate and reestablish contact. He completely defeated her attempts to regain any sense of privacy.
The message was clear.
There is no escaping me.
So while Erin is dealing with this escalating psychological war, the police are dealing with a devastating physical timeline of murder. Let's just establish the four known victims here.
Okay. We have Ann Morton, Leigh Porter, Cynthia Mayers, and then Aaron's best friend, Carol Henderson, who went missing.
And the pattern of abduction it was tragically consistent.
Vanished. They left work or home and just vanished into thin air. Initially, the police found no witnesses, no immediate signs of a struggle where they were taken.
That high level of efficiency, it suggests something, doesn't it?
It suggests the killer either used immense surprise or, and this is maybe even more disturbing, he was able to lure them with some kind of convincing pretense. He got them to lower their guard.
And then we get to the autopsy findings, which are deeply, deeply disturbing.
The official cause of death for all confirmed victims was exsanguination.
They bled to death.
Yes, and that is analytically significant. Exsanguination is not the result of a quick, clean act of violence that's just designed to end a life. It implies a prolonged, agonizing final interaction.
It's a ritual.
It speaks to a ritualized killing, yes, where the perpetrator is focused on inflicting suffering, maintaining control, and watching the process unfold slowly. This confirms the psychological torture began well before the physical confrontation ever did.
But there was a breakthrough. A vital piece of forensic data broke through the killer's meticulous planning.
That's right. Cynthia Mayers, the third victim, she didn't vanish without a fight.
Okay.
So although her body was found in a dump site with minimal evidence, she fought back hard enough to leave behind minute DNA material on the killer.
Not enough for a profile.
Not for a clean profile yet, no. But enough to confirm a sex was involved and, critically, to establish a detailed forensic timeline based on her defensive wounds and the bruising.
And that bruising analysis becomes important later.
It becomes instrumental, first in confusing the investigation, and then eventually in refocusing it completely.
So despite this tiny forensic breakthrough and the growing number of bodies, the initial investigation just hits a major brick wall.
Oh, a massive one. Detective Tony Marino and his partner, Spence and Winters, they were just running themselves ragged.
And their frustration you can see in the internal notes. They couldn't find a pattern.
They were looking for the wrong kind of link. They couldn't find a connection based on geography or jobs or social circles. You have a store clerk, a secretary, a nurse, and a hairdresser.
They seem completely random.
Which is the worst possible scenario in a serial investigation.
And the police, they were kind of blinded by their own assumptions. They developed this working theory.
The single mother theory, that the victims must be single mothers, maybe, seeking out men. But that theory immediately contradicted the facts on the ground.
Right, because of Cynthia Mayers.
Exactly. The sergeant specifically noted that 2 victims were single, but Cynthia Mayers was newly married. She'd had a quickie wedding in Vegas just before her husband deployed overseas.
And that detail, which was supposed to help, actually just threw them off course.
It steered them further away from the truth. They spent crucial time trying to fit a square peg into a round hole based on marital status, instead of looking at a deeper, shared vulnerability.
And all this time, Tony, our lead detective, he's already walking this deeply complicated personal line. You can see the toll building on him even before Aaron becomes the official next target.
He was already volunteering a significant amount of his time and his emotional energy, helping Aaron's son, Jack, helping him go on a Disney World bus trip.
He became the pretend dad for the trip.
He did. And this wasn't just, altruism. Tony's own father was a cop who was killed young. He felt this profound, almost inherited connection to Jack's situation.
So his personal stakes were already high.
Incredibly high.
Yeah.
Which meant that when the case inevitably connected directly to Aaron, his professional objectivity was already happened. Well, it was deeply compromised.
Okay, let's pivot now. We're moving away from the confusion on the ground and into Section 2, finding the pattern. Because the breakthrough only came after they stopped looking at external connections.
And started looking at the internal logic of the killer.
This is where profiling saves the day.
It does, but only by forcing the investigators to change their perspective entirely. The FBI brought in Special Agent Jackie Davidson, and her initial profile was based almost entirely on the lack of organization at the disposal sites.
Walk us through that distinction, because the stalking was so meticulous. How does that square with a disorganized site?
It seems like a contradiction, right? But Davidson provided a profile of a killer who is technically disorganized in his operational methodology. Late 30s, early 40s, socially inadequate, a loner, eccentric, probably creepy to people who knew him.
Okay, so where does the disorganized part come from?
It came from the fact that he was dumping the bodies quickly and without any ritualistic care, far from where he killed them. This contrasted so sharply with the meticulous, highly controlled stalking.
So the stalking was organized, but the dumping was chaotic.
Exactly. It suggests a high degree of panic or maybe emotional exhaustion after the murder ritual itself was complete. Davidson's key insight was that the actual crime scene, the place where the exsanguination took place, was portable or just unknown, which is why the dump sites offered no real clues.
So the link wasn't geographical
Well,
or even social.
and that leads to her central guiding piece of advice for the detectives.
What was that?
She told them, stop looking for a social link. Stop looking for a bar, a job, a friend group. She insisted the killer's link was purely psychological. It was based on a common sin they had all committed, in his mind.
A common sin. Why?
That sin, she said, was the thread. That was the thematic connection the police were missing.
So this advice, it forced Tony and his team to go back through the victims' lives, but with a completely different lens.
And they finally looked past marital status, the newly married Cynthia Mayers, the single Ann Morton, and they focused entirely on the children.
And that's the aha moment.
It's the moment the whole case snaps into horrifying focus. The single mother theory was almost a bullseye, but the required specificity was devastatingly precise.
They were looking for single mothers with handicapped or special needs children.
Once that detail was isolated, everything changed.
Let's lay out that victim breakdown again, because the specificity is it's the key to the killer's pathology.
Okay. Ann Morton's child had a specific diagnosed learning disability. The child required regular physical and occupational therapy sessions.
Lee Porter.
Had a deaf child.
Cynthia Mayers, the newly married victim.
And an autistic son.
And Carol Henderson, Aaron's missing friend.
Her daughter Amy has Down syndrome.
And of course, Aaron O'Malley, now confirmed as the primary target, had a son, Jack, who suffered from cerebral palsy.
This connection, this focus on the maternal relationship to a child with a disability, that was the invisible, deeply traumatic link the killer was acting on.
The discovery was both a relief, because they finally had a profile, and a catastrophic confirmation that Aaron was in immediate danger.
Absolutely. The perpetrator's previous psychological warfare against her was no longer just random harassment. It was calculated pre-attack maneuvering.
And this is where the threats escalated. They confirmed her status as the next victim.
She received gifts and threats that mirrored the pre-abduction torture that Carol Henderson had endured. The pattern was now established.
So before the physical abduction, the killer inflicted psychological humiliation.
Right. Carol, for example, received these strange, disgusting gifts. Rotten fruit, dead bugs, deliberately placed where she would find them. This wasn't subtle. It was meant to evoke revulsion and fear.
For Aaron, the marker was more symbolic, but just as sinister.
A dead, withered rose left under her windshield wiper. And it was paired with a note designed to terrorize.
And the note gave them a real insight into his twisted mindset.
It did. It read, "Death knows this rose to be as black as your heart is to thee." He wasn't just claiming responsibility for the fear, he was issuing a judgment. He was identifying himself as the executor of some moral debt he thought she owed.
The escalation from silent calls to symbolic death threats
Meant the attack was imminent. The police were now in a reactive race against time.
the pressure cooker intensified. Moving into Section 3, once they had this highly specific victim profile, the investigation focused on who had access to these women and their children.
And the initial focus landed squarely on a very, very convincing red herring.
Dr. Robert Stone.
He was the perfect fit on paper, which is why the police wasted so much critical time on him. He was Carol's date. He was Aaron's ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
He fit the social intimacy profile perfectly.
And most damningly,
He was the pediatrician for all 4 of the known victims. He was the one crucial connective thread they had missed when they were just looking at jobs and neighborhoods.
and the evidence against him seemed overwhelming. It supported his arrest.
Oh, absolutely. A locket containing a picture of Amy Carroll's daughter was found strategically embedded in the carpeting of Stone's car.
It was a clear attempt to frame him, designed to look like a desperate, guilt-ridden keepsake.
But the forensic timeline started to undermine the perfect suspect theory. Remember that DNA and bruising evidence from Cynthia Mayers?
Yeah, the timeline from her defensive wounds.
The analysis of her injuries placed the time of injury just before Stone was scheduled to give a medical presentation hundreds of miles away in another state. The alibi wasn't ironclad, but it created sufficient doubt.
And Tony Marino's personal instincts started screaming.
His gut was telling him something was wrong. He felt Stone's distress during questioning was genuine grief, genuine panic over being falsely accused, not the calculated performance of a murderer.
And Tony's willingness to trust his gut, even against strong physical evidence like the locket, was the turning point.
It was. He began focusing on the framing itself. If Stone was framed who had intimate knowledge of Stone's possessions, the victim's files, their schedules, and the ability to move around completely unseen.
This analysis led Tony to the truth, and it was revealed during a moment of mundane desperation, a strategy meeting at an IHOP.
That scene is so indicative of real investigative work. The epiphany strikes you outside the sterile environment of the precinct.
Right.
They realized the framer needed access not just to Stone's social life, but his professional life. His office, his car, his schedule. The initial search focused on Stone's office staff, all clean. But who else had constant, unsupervised access?
The office cleaning service.
Which led directly to the true killer, Jim Peters.
Peters was the hospital janitor, a man who was always underfoot, but perpetually invisible.
He cleaned the hospital corridors, the records rooms, the general offices, and critically, the pediatrician's offices. He had access to schedules, addresses, private details, everything necessary to execute the stalking.
And there's this grotesque layer of irony to his invisibility. He also moonlighted as a beloved clown visiting the sick children in the pediatric ward.
The clown facade, a symbol of innocence and healing. That was his perfect cloak. He was literally a fixture in the lives of these mothers and children, but viewed as completely harmless. It ensured he could gather information and place threats like the rotten fruit in the rose without arousing any suspicion.
He weaponized being overlooked.
He did. And now we have to delve into the core of the case, Jim Peters' motivation. And this was all revealed during his final, desperate confrontation with Aaron.
This is where the investigation transitions entirely from a manhunt to a profound study of pathology, one driven by childhood trauma.
Peters' actions were rooted in a horrific personal history. He revealed to Aaron that he, too, was a special needs kid as a child, a detail that was key to his specific victim selection.
His mother.
His mother, overwhelmed or just plain cruel, frequently locked him in a closet in the dark as punishment.
And that abuse created this profoundly distorted, pathologically judgmental worldview.
He didn't just hate his mother. He projected that hatred onto every mother he saw struggling, or perceived as struggling, with a child who required extra care.
So he saw the victims, all these mothers of special needs children, as selfish, cruel sinners.
Yes. Sinners who hated their children, who only cared about themselves, or specifically about bringing men home. This was a direct echo of his own childhood trauma, where he felt his mother was prioritizing herself over his well-being.
In his mission.
Yeah.
It wasn't random violence. He saw himself as a hero.
A hero enacting a perverse kind of justice. His confession was just chilling. He believed he was rescuing these children by killing their mothers.
His twisted logic was that by eliminating the cruel sinner, the child would then be adopted into a real family with two parents, or placed in a caring foster family. The stable life he was denied.
He was trying to rewrite his own ending through the murder of others.
And the ritual of exsanguination, the psychological torture, it all fit this hero complex perfectly.
Perfectly. He needed them to suffer because he believed they had committed the sin of neglecting their vulnerable children. He confirmed that he taunted them to make them pay for their perceived selfishness.
He actually bragged to Aaron.
He did. He bragged to Aaron that he made Carol Henderson sorry for the way she acted in the hospital cafeteria.
Wait. Carol's death was driven, in part, by a moment in a cafeteria.
That's the terrifying specificity of his pathology. Carol, maybe stressed from her job or overwhelmed by caring for Amy, might have been unintentionally short or dismissive to Jim Peters, the janitor, during a coffee break.
A tiny accidental slight.
A casual dismissal of the invisible man. But to a sensitive, deeply paranoid and traumatized individual like Peters, that was all the confirmation he needed. It proved to him that she was indeed a cruel, selfish mother deserving of death. It elevated a momentary lapse in manners to a capital offense.
Unbelievable. The case now shifts from tracking the killer to understanding how the primary target, Aaron O'Malley, fought off not just a murderer, but her own deeply ingrained psychological defenses.
Aaron was a fortress built on isolation and control. She rigidly adhered to her personal mandate, the no cops, no men rule.
She even admitted Tony was the nicest guy she'd ever met.
She did, yet she maintained this emotional distance. Because her past taught her that love equals vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to catastrophic loss.
We have to review her history to understand this rigid barrier. It's just a painful accumulation of trauma.
It is. First, her father was a cop, and he was killed in the line of duty. So she grew up with this constant, searing anxiety of potential loss.
And that fear was compounded by her mother.
An alcoholic who physically abused Erin, we're talking a broken bone, specifically while her father was away doing his dangerous job. So she associated the job with the instability of her childhood and the abuse she endured.
And the final relational betrayal came from her husband.
He deserted her. Immediately after their son, Jack, was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, the message was just loud and clear. When things get tough, people leave.
So for Erin, the equation was set in stone. Love is a trigger for abuse, abandonment, and ultimate grief.
So she sought a neat little life where everything's predictable. And Tony, a police officer, represented the ultimate threat to that manufactured stability. His very presence, just his profession, triggered her deepest childhood fears.
Tony, though, was just relentlessly dependable. He systematically dismantled her barriers, often without even realizing he was doing it.
His own trauma growing up without his cop father gave him that immediate unspoken bond with Jack. He wasn't trying to woo Erin, he was genuinely committed to helping Jack navigate his world, and that served as the safest pathway into Erin's guarded life.
He demonstrated this quiet strength in moments of crisis, but also in just mundane necessity.
We see him fixing her painful leg cramp, providing the thoughtful bubble bath surprise after a scare at her home,
And getting Jack that specialized three-wheeled bike that allowed him to finally ride with his friends.
These weren't grand romantic gestures, they were consistent demonstrations of reliability. He provided predictability in an unpredictable job. And his patience during her emotional lashing out, especially when she was grieving Carol, was key. He understood her anger wasn't a rejection of him, but a desperate expression of fear and her inability to control her circumstances.
And it's vital we also highlight the external support system that provided the necessary emotional and practical cushion during all of this.
And Tess and the neighbor, Patrick Fitzgerald, or Fitz, they were crucial.
Tess was the unwavering anchor.
She provided practical advice, emotional grounding, and she was the subtle matchmaker who constantly challenged Erin's isolationist tendencies. She relentlessly pushed Tony's good qualities down her throat.
She recognized that Erin's fear was limiting her life, and she refused to let her just retreat entirely.
And Patrick Fitzgerald, Fitz, became a vital, active protector. He stepped up. He started showing up unannounced, keeping an eye on the house, and eventually driving Jack and Amy around. He became a necessary, low-profile component of the police surveillance plan.
So this network meant that even when Erin was actively rejecting Tony and professional protection because of her deep-seated fear of police,
She was still surrounded by a protective buffer that ensured her survival. She was fighting her deepest psychological battles while literally being watched over by allies she hadn't consciously chosen.
and that sets the stage perfectly for the high-stakes confrontation in Section 5, the reckoning and the change of heart.
Tony's crucial realization about Peter's identity sent him racing back, knowing he had to stop the attack.
The setup was meticulous. It just reinforces Peter's cunning.
Absolutely. Jack and Amy were safely next door at Patrick's house for an indoor campout, which ensured Erin was alone and vulnerable. And Patrick, completely unaware of the threat, delivered the final sinister package: Erin's missing green scarf and the note.
And Peters arrived almost immediately after, using his perfect cover.
Claiming to help with birthday balloons for Jack's upcoming party, the friendly janitor, the clown, he was now in the house.
The kitchen confrontation was sudden and terrifying.
Peters was prepared. He used both a knife and a handgun. He attacked Erin immediately, backhanding her across the face and, horrifyingly, slicing her throat.
And in that moment, facing imminent death, Erin didn't entirely panic. She reverted to this deep, ingrained piece of her childhood faith.
She recited the 23rd Psalm, silently praying, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death."
And that grounding moment gave her the clarity she needed to resist, just as Peters was preparing to finish his ritual.
Tony burst in. He had deduced the killer's timing and identity. It was a dramatic entrance, but it was paid for dearly.
Tony was off duty and already injured, yet he didn't hesitate. But before he could fully neutralize Peters, the janitor spun around and shot him in the back.
Tony collapsed. He suffered the gunshot wound and severe head trauma when he slammed into the porch railing. The primary protection was down, yet the threat remained.
And with Tony incapacitated, Erin seized her own moment of profound agency.
She grabbed Tony's fallen gun. Rage and resolve, fueled by the memory of Carol and the sheer terror of her own death ritual, just gave her this incredible strength.
She held Peters at bay.
And rage gave way to a terrible clarity. She struggled internally with the decision to pull the trigger. She realized she was capable of executing him, and this moment of self-knowledge that she, the victim, could become the executioner was deeply unsettling for her.
She forced Peters to explain his twisted logic, his hero complex, allowing him to confess his motivations right to her face. But instead of vengeance,
She chose something harder: restraint. She slowly handed the weapon over to Tony, who was weak and injured on the floor, allowing police protocol to take over just as backup flooded the scene.
she chose law over raw, understandable revenge.
The aftermath was immediate and heartbreaking. Tony was rushed to the hospital with severe injuries, and the cost of his deduction was high. The private detective Tony had hired to watch Aaron's house was found dead in his car,
Ambushed and killed by Peters.
which just confirms the killer's high operational cunning even in those final moments.
But the deep dive has to focus on the emotional aftermath, particularly Aaron's initial choice. While Tony lay unconscious in the ICU, she walked away.
It was a conscious retreat rooted entirely in her trauma. She whispered her love to him but declared she could not be a cop's wife. She feared the stress would eventually make her angry and bitter like my mother.
She was projecting her mother's alcoholic abuse and instability onto Tony's dangerous profession.
And this is where Aunt Tess delivers the crucial corrective intervention. Tess confronts Aaron with the truth about their shared past.
And it's a bombshell.
A huge one. Tess revealed that she, too, was abused by Aaron's mother. This clarified the origin of Aaron's pain. Her trauma stemmed not from her father's job as a cop, but from her mother's abuse and alcoholism while he was away.
The job was the catalyst for the abuse, not the cause of it.
This realization was devastating but also liberating. Erin had been carrying the weight of her mother's failure and her own childhood pain, misdirecting it all onto Tony's profession.
And she finally recognized that her fear of vulnerability, her fear of loss, was forcing her to choose a lonely, empty life.
She recognized that living in total isolation, unwilling to love, was actually the worst kind of death. She saw the parallel between her self-imposed isolation and the internal prison Peters had built for himself.
So Erin returned to the hospital. She made a difficult, conscious choice to embrace the risk of commitment.
She told Tony, choosing vulnerability, "If I live my life afraid to love someone because they might die or because they might leave, I'm going to live a lonely, empty life." She chose the instability of true love over the safety of isolation.
It's an incredible emotional decision that completes the psychological arc of the survivor, mirroring the successful forensic dismantling of the killer's pathology.
It really is.
Okay, let's consolidate the key analytical insights we've extracted from this deep dive into the Midnight Caller case file.
Right. So, firstly, the forensic takeaway is the extreme specificity that's required to crack a complex serial case. It wasn't enough to find single mothers. The profile was terrifyingly niche single mothers raising special needs children, a theme dictated entirely by the perpetrator's own unresolved childhood trauma.
Secondly, we saw the effectiveness of specialized psychological profiling, but only when the detectives were forced to discard their own assumptions.
Exactly. FBI agent Davidson's simple instruction to seek the common sin rather than a geographical or social link was the investigative key. It's what ultimately allowed Tony Marino to connect the Invisible Man janitor back to the victim's records.
And finally, the profound psychological insight lies in the duality of trauma.
It does. We see the destructive impact in Jim Peters, who pathologically sought vengeance and self-justification through murder and ritualized suffering. He was trying to heal his trauma by inflicting death.
And conversely, we see the impact in Erin O'Malley. Her past trauma dictated every relational choice she made, forcing her to reject stability out of a fear of loss.
And it was only that extreme life-or-death confrontation that forced her to confront the reality that isolation, while it feels safe, would be the true death of her spirit.
So we spent this time analyzing how Erin O'Malley's deeply buried past trauma dictated every choice she made in life, from who she loved to how she processed grief and fear. Her greatest fear was the potential for loss and instability, the fear embodied by the unpredictable nature of a police officer's life.
As you process this case file, we ask you to reflect on your own life. What are the hidden rules and internal barriers your own past has imposed on your future decisions? Because we all have them.
What are the metaphorical cops you refuse to date? Or the equivalent of the high-risk, high-reward choices you avoid in your own life?
The things you run from, not because they are inherently bad or risky, but because they represent a vulnerability, a potential for pain that you are, scared to embrace.
Recognizing that self-imposed constraint might just be the first necessary step toward the kind of liberation and commitment Erin O'Malley finally chose, even when facing the ghost of her own trauma.